4.1 Ethical, Legal and Health and Safety Issues in Sport and Exercise Science Research. Ethical and legal. These are two terms used in research as they must be followed. Legal means that everything that is being experimented or researched has to be legal and within the boundaries of the law. Ethical and ethics means that the research taking place has to follow the moral principles that dictate others' behaviour. For example, research and testing products is ethically correct. However, testing products on animals who don't have the ability to give consent is ethically wrong. Health and safety is the regulations, rules and procedures that are put in place and are intended to prevent accident or injury in the workplace or public environments. In 1974, a Health and Safety at Work Act was put in place and states that it is the duty of every employer, so far as is reasonably practicable, to ensure the health and safety and welfare of all their employees. BASES is an organisation that provides a code of conduct to be followed by researchers in the sports and exercise world. They outline the legal and ethical issues along with health and safety guidelines to keep researchers and participants safe, legally and health-wise, throughout research. A brief history of research. There are many rules and regulations as to how people can research in the modern day due to the Nuremberg Code and the Declaration of Helsinki. The Nuremberg Code is a set of research ethics principles for human experimentation and was created at the end of World War II in 1947. The Nuremberg Code includes points such as voluntary consent must be given for someone to participate. The participant can end the experiment at any time. And the Declaration of Helsinki was developed by the World Medical Association and is a set of ethical principles for research conducted on human participants. It was created in 1964. The reason these were created was because of the testing subjects were put through by the Nazis in the Second World War. This included bone and muscle transplants, mustard gas experiments, and seeing how far the body could be pushed in different conditions, like heat, the cold, water, altitude, and all the atrocious experiments were carried out. And because at the time none of these rules were in place, they did not care for what they did to their subjects. The Declaration of Helsinki and Nuremberg Code were put in place to make sure nothing like what the Nazis did in experiments, could happen again. Here is Scenario 1, and here is the Scenario 1 evaluation. The good practice includes ethical clearance and institutional ethics and review committee. The poor practice includes no informed consent. This is bad as the scenario does not have an informed consent form. However, it's said to be a generic one, which leads me to believe that it does not fully describe the full nature of what's going to happen during the research session to the gymnasts. This is bad as it means the gymnasts do not know what they're getting themselves into, and as it says later, they felt reluctant to participate. And this is deception by omission as well, as the researcher did not tell them what they were doing. There is also no evidence of subject permission, as the researcher did not gain the permission of the subjects to perform what he wanted. As it said, they were reluctant to take part, however he insisted they continue. This is bad as it shows the researcher has no integrity, and forcing someone to do something that they don't want to do can make the subject feel victimised and negative, especially when it comes to how people view their body. Forcing them to continue can lead up to a fine, ethical training and supervision for the next 2.5 years of their career. It probably wouldn't make them lose their job in this case, but however, will damage their reputation and credibility. They will also lose their BASES accreditation. They had no right to withdraw either, as it said that the researcher insisted them to continue and to keep going. This shows that when the participants wanted to withdraw, they did not because they did not want to partake in the testing, bearing in mind the test is a bit of a strange one to perform anyway. The researcher insisted that they continued even though they said they did not want to. This violates their right to withdraw, which is put in place for exactly this reason. If a participant does not know what they're getting into, and as a result of this do not want to continue by law, the researcher has to stop the research. There is also no data protection, And this is seen at the end of the scenario, as it states there that the results from the testing were put up onto a whiteboard for the coach to take a photo. However, anyone could have seen this, as it was done in front of the gymnasts. This directly disobeys the Data Protection Act of 1998, which states that the data collected needs to remain confidential and the scores of each person has to be anonymous unless the volunteers say they're okay with it going public. And finally, the researcher also didn't debrief the participants. This is bad, as they are legally required to debrief the participants on what is going on. To be done, it's legally required to debrief the participants on what is going to be done with the data they found, where the data is going to be displayed, and who is able to access the data. And they will have to accept that they are okay with who can see it. Not doing this can result in a loss of research license, a fine, and a formal reprimand. The consequences to the participant can involve psychological harm, as they were forced to continue, and also social harm, as they had their results shown in front of everyone and were forced to wear swimsuits in the lab, even though they might have felt uncomfortable doing so. Consequences to the researcher could involve having supervision on their next 3 to 5 investigations or researches. They could be fined for not following the correct rules up to £3,000, and they could be stripped of their bases accreditation and finally given ethical training. Corrections to put this research right would include providing a full, detailed list of what's going to occur within the research in the informed consent form. And if the participants feel reluctant to take part, you're not allowed to force them to do so, and they're allowed to drop out whenever they want. And don't show everyone the data on the whiteboard for everyone to see. Write it up privately, so where no one can see it. And also debrief the gymnasts at the end and tell them what the testing was for and what's happening with the results. Here is an informed consent form that I have found, which could have been used to show what the investigation has in it. Here is scenario 2, and scenario 2's evaluation. I found no good practice, and the poor practice included the test sequence, because in the scenario it states with little time to spare. This shows that the ordering of the tests was either not done to their best, or the time frame was too short for the test they had chosen. Either way, they're organising what tests are performed when can maximise the time taken to do the whole test. For example, if you need to perform maximal power, do that before an endurance test, as you would be tired after the endurance test and couldn't perform the maximal power to your maximal ability. A consequence for this could be a suspension for 2 to 3 weeks, or if they got through the rush participants, if they rushed through the participants, which they did, and without following health and safety, they can get fined up to £2,500 and a loss of their research licence. It also states in the scenario that they're not volunteers, and where it says nowhere in there that they're volunteers, this means there's a chance they may not be, and this can lead to them being in a lot of trouble. For the researcher, including a loss of job, licence, and bases accreditation, along with fines of upwards of £2,000, and even a minor amount of time in prison for 3 to 4 months for forceful conduct. They also nowhere in there it says they have the right to withdraw, and it says in the scenario that the researcher insisted they went on with the practice even after being given the thumbs down. This is a major thing to do, and it has huge repercussions, as the right to withdraw was in the Nuremberg Code, which was created to stop things like people being forced to continue happening. Punishment can include a loss of their job, their research license and basis accreditation, along with fines, and for them to partake in ethical training. They also show no respect to the participants, and they called the participants a girl's blouse, and they said they should be doing better. This lack of respect can be damaging to participants, and on their confidence and in themselves, and also has repercussions for the researcher, as in get fines of up to £200, ethical training, and a minor suspension of 2 to 3 weeks. They also show no first aid procedure. In the scenario, it states that the researcher does not know where the first aid kit is and gets the injured boy to run it under some cold water. This is bad, as having first aid in hand is one of the most important things to have when performing research, just in case something does go wrong and someone gets hurt. Not having first aid in hand can lead to sanctions or a fine, especially if someone gets hurt from not having it. A future supervision for your next 5 research projects, a tribunal, and a loss of a BASES accreditation. There is also no researcher responsibility, as it is the researcher's responsibility to make sure everything is in place for the research to happen. So when they forget something like a first aid kit, it has a big impact if someone gets hurt. The sanctions for this will be the same. They also have a poor preparation of the subject, the preparation of the subjects includes warming them up before exercise and making sure they are wearing correct clothing and stuff like that. This was overlooked in the scenario, as it states that the researcher, to save time, reduced the warm-up of their participants. This is bad, as it increases the likeliness of an injury and they're not properly prepared, and it can also lead to misleading results. Not properly preparing the test subjects can lead up to an £800 fine, depending on the result of them not being properly prepared. This could be like an injury or something, and future supervision for the next year of research and a formal reprimand are the consequences. There's also equality and scientific misconduct. Equality is treating all participants equally, and this is shown to happen. This is not shown to happen, as it says in the scenario, the researcher decides to get the better boys done first, as they might run out of time. This shows no equality between what's being going on and what's being researched. There's also scientific misconduct in doing so. This can lead to fines and supervision for the next 6 months of research, as it is not the most major wrongdoing, but it's still not proper conduct when researching anything. Finally, again, there is no data protection. The scenario shows that 2 weeks after the testing, the data is in their dissertation and in the university portal. This shows no data protection, as nowhere in the scenario does it say the researcher lets the participants know that they are going to be using the data in their dissertation and putting it in a university portal. This can lead to fines and a suspension of their job for up to a year, with ethical training taking place. Finally, there is no risk assessment, and this shows they do not know the risks of the test, and also that the research has not been approved by a board, as this would have happened if a risk assessment was in place. I've created a risk assessment for the next slide for the scenario. Here is the risk assessment for the VO2 max test on a treadmill.